It's really great to be here and to talk with you all about siblings. I know that Katie recently came through our Sib Shop facilitator training, and that you guys are really excited about siblings, and that, of course, makes us excited, and we're really grateful. I'm Emily Holl. Great job pronouncing the last name too. And I'm the lucky person who gets to be the director of the Sibling Support Project here in the Seattle, Washington area. And I'm going to talk today about how and why we can all support siblings. And I'll just start with a little bit. You guys know my entire life story, thanks to Megan. Thank you so much for sharing all that again. As Megan mentioned, I've worked in the disability field for a very long time. I worked for many years at a large disability service provider in New York City. And there I was able to create some sibling services and supports. I conducted some sibling research. I have contributed to some sibling books, and have really been grateful for all that experience. But really, probably my greatest qualification for this job is that, as Megan said, I'm also a sibling. And so there in the center is a picture of me and my older brother, Peter. He's 2 years older than I am. He has an intellectual disability. And he really is at the center of many of my personal and professional decisions, which is common for many siblings. That's one of the things we're going to talk about today. And his name is Peter. I'm really grateful to Peter, because he really is the reason that I'm here with all of you guys today. And just don't tell him that, because his head will just get much bigger than it already is. And that's totally unnecessary. That's a picture of us, by the way, at the White House in 2010 at the 20th anniversary celebration of the Americans with Disabilities Act. That was one of the really fun things that we got to do together. And in my work as director of the Sibling Support Project, I really find myself playing different roles. And one of them is as a sibling advocate, which Katie knows from the training. And one of the things that I do in that role is talk to organizations like yours, and honestly, just about anyone who will listen to me about why siblings are just too important to ignore. And so I'm really grateful for that opportunity today. For those of you who don't know about the Sibling Support Project, we are a proud program of Kindering, which is the largest early intervention provider in Washington State. We're also the first national program across the US that's dedicated entirely to supporting millions of brothers and sisters of people with special developmental health and mental health concerns. And we do our work kind of in a few different categories. Our offerings include education, which is through books, some of which you see on the screen there. And, we're really proud of the books that we've written because they're written not only for siblings, but largely by siblings and with the help of siblings, and incorporating as much as we can sibling voices, right? The true experts on the sibling experience. So we have books for siblings of all ages. And then we also facilitate support opportunities. First and foremost, Sib Shops, that's kind of what we're best known for. And I'm going to talk about those in a few minutes. Sib Shops are for school-age brothers and sisters of kids with disabilities. We also have 3 closed Facebook groups. They're our online sibling communities for siblings of different ages. And the first one you see there is SibNet. That's our largest and longest standing group for adult siblings, adult brothers and sisters. We have Sib Teen for adolescent siblings, as you could probably imagine. And then we also have Sib 20, which is a group for siblings who are in their 20s. And what we find is that the issues that siblings experience, there are many commonalities among those experiences, but they kind of sort of shift at different ages. And so that's why these groups are age specific, because some of the issues that come up in your teens are a little bit different from some of the ones that might come up when you're, in your 30s or in your 40s, for example. So if you know of siblings who are in any of these age groups and who would like to connect with other brothers and sisters, please do tell them about our Facebook groups. They're all wonderfully warm, reflective communities where siblings can reach out, get information, validation, which is so important, and a lot of support. So I wanted to tell you a little bit more about SIB shops. That's kind of what we're best known for. SIB shops have existed for almost 4 decades, and SIB shops are really our answer for the same kind of common sense peer support that parents get from a good parent-to-parent program or a parent support group. And we're going to talk a little bit later in a few minutes about how sibling experiences really do parallel parent experiences. That pretty much anything we can say about being the parent of a child with special needs. By the way, I use that term. It's really imperfect. Special needs. It's not the best term, but it does save a little time. So it's shorter. So you'll find me saying it throughout the presentation. But pretty much anything that we can say about being the parent of a child with special needs, we can put ditto marks on for siblings, right? We know this from the research. And one of the things that we know from the research is that one of the major ways that that is true is that just like parents, siblings really benefit from connecting with other siblings, with other people walking a similar path. When you think about, many of you probably work with parents, when you think about how we support parents in our work, one of the first things that we think about is connecting parents with other parents, right? We would never ask a parent of a child with a disability to walk this path alone, right? We want to make sure that they connect with other parents. And, the benefits that parents get from connecting with each other are really the very same benefits that siblings get from connecting with one another, right? So that they feel they're not so alone, that their feelings are valid, their experiences are not happening alone in a bubble somewhere, right? And so that's kind of the idea behind SIB shops. We want to make sure that young children, school-age children, have opportunities to connect with each other. First of all, to meet other siblings. I'll tell you, when I was growing up as a sibling, I didn't know a single other person who had a brother or sister with disability. And that was a really lonely place to live. That was a really kind of isolating place to grow up. And so first and foremost, we want kids to be able to meet each other and recognize, hey, there's other kids out there who have brothers and sisters with disabilities too. We want to make sure that at SIB shops, siblings can get information about their brothers and sisters' disabilities and maybe the services they receive. And first and foremost, we want them to come and have fun. SIB shops are not therapy, group or otherwise. They're not clinical interventions. SIB shops are fun, pedal to the metal events where kids can come and play. And first and foremost, come and be kids. We know that so many of these young siblings tend to grow up faster than their peers, and they're like little adults carrying the world around on their shoulders. And so we want SIB shops to be a place where they can just come and relax and have a great time. And you see that happening in some of these pictures. So that's kind of the formula for SIB shops: information and support in a highly recreational setting, because we want SIB shops to be a place where kids want to come and have fun. Over in the bottom left-hand corner, you kind of see what SIB shops have looked like over the past year, kind of what today looks like. Since the pandemic set in, many of our SIB shops have moved from in-person meetings to online meetings. And so we've been supporting a lot of young brothers and sisters over the past year online. And it's been really, really rewarding to hear from these young brothers and sisters how much these meetings mean to them, especially being so isolated at home with their families for so long. There are over 550 SIB shops around the globe, and you see there in our little map where they exist. SIB shops exist pretty much anywhere kids exist, right? They're in schools, they're in parks and rec departments, they're at disability service providers, early intervention centers, camps, churches, synagogues, local community organizations that support people with disabilities and their families. That's usually a great place that you would find a SIB shop. You can search our online directory for a SIB shop in your area. I know in Alaska, SIB shops are few and far between, and we're really, really trying to change that so that people can find supports in their local communities. And I appreciate so much that you guys are starting SIB shops at Stone Soup Group, and hoping to expand that. And so if you know of people who are looking for SIB shops, please do point them in our direction. If you're interested in starting a SIB shop and you haven't been through the training, talk to Katie, contact me, and we can definitely get you started. And I just love this quote from a SIB shop participant from one of our SIB shops in Trinidad and Tobago. And she says, "Thank you for doing SIB shops. I felt like I wasn't important and my needs didn't matter because my siblings required so much support. But this group has made me feel it has meant so much to me." And that's, a sentiment we hear a lot from our SIB shops. Last piece of information on SIB shops, we've been doing them for a really long time. And in 2005, a team of researchers from the University of Washington here did a study because they wanted to see if there was any lasting benefit that siblings experienced from participating in SIB shops. So they surveyed a number of adult siblings age 18 to 34 who had participated in SIB shops as kids to find out, what kind of lasting impact. And to really kind of generally summarize their findings, they found that over 90% of respondents said that SIB shops had a positive effect on the feelings they had for their siblings, which we really like. SIB shops taught coping strategies to over 66% of respondents, which is great. We want to teach these kiddos coping strategies. 75% reported that SIB shops affected their adult lives. And there's a reason that bullet is in a different color. I'll go back to that in just a second. And then 94% said that they would recommend SIB shops to others, which is great, right? We want people to spread the word. The reason we love that third bullet so much is because 75% of these now adult siblings said that because of their experiences in SIB shops, they felt as children, they felt more ready, willing, and able as adults to step into some kind of supportive role for their brothers and sisters with disabilities. And so what that tells us is that siblings are not the only people who benefit from SIB shops, that the person with the disability really does too. Parents do, because now here's this sibling who is willing to be part of the support team. Okay, so that was a lot about SIB shops, but why? Why do we go to all the trouble to support siblings? Why are we here today talking about siblings? And these are questions that I answer a lot in my work, right? When I talked about being a sibling advocate, this is really the heart and soul of what I mean, because, in our field, when we talk about family support, right? And I have a lot of friends and colleagues who proudly say they offer family-centered care and family-centered support. But when we're talking about family care and family support, you know what? Most of the time, what we're really talking about is parents, okay? We're talking about parent support. And if we're really honest, we're talking mostly about mom support, because moms are the ones who kind of show up, right? Who are bringing the kids to the appointments and going to the therapies, and they're on the phone and sending the emails. And what we really, I think, would benefit all of us to do as providers, to think about how a disability really impacts an entire family. And that's really where SIB shops came from. When our founder, Don Meyer, more than 40 years ago, started to think about, a disability really affects the whole family. Yeah, everybody in that family is experiencing that disability, maybe in a slightly different way. And that certainly goes for siblings, right? And these are kind of the reasons that our organization exists, and that great organizations like yours are starting to recognize the importance of supporting siblings. The first is one that I already told you. We know this from the research. Siblings' experiences parallel parents' experiences. As I said, just about anything that you can say about being the parent of a child with disabilities, it's very much true of siblings. But if we look at the supports that are out there for parents, it's as opposed to the supports that are out there for siblings, it's pretty easy to see who's getting the short end of the stick. And, one little tiny example is that in the US, there are probably 300 or 400 people whose full-time job it is to worry about the well-being of parents of kids with special needs, right? And that's great. There should be. In fact, there should be more than 300 or 400 people. But to my knowledge, there's only one person in the entire United States whose full-time job it is to worry about the well-being of siblings. And that person is me. And don't get me wrong, I feel really lucky to be that person. But we're talking about millions and millions of people. Think about the 32 million people in the US who have some kind of cognitive disability, right? We're not even talking about physical disabilities or chronic health concerns, right? Those 32 million people, of those 32 million people who have some kind of cognitive disability, most of them have a brother or sister, right? That's a lot of siblings for me to worry about. So thank you guys for being here today to join me on that journey. So sibling experiences, parallel parent experiences. The second reason we should be thinking about siblings and supporting them is that sibling issues are lifespan issues, right? No one is going to have as long of relationship to the person with a disability as his or her brothers and sisters, right? This is a relationship that will surpass the relationship certainly of any service provider, right, to the person with the disability, and probably outlast even the parent relationship, right? Because we're peers with our brothers and sisters, we're contemporaries. So this is a relationship that can easily exceed 65, 70, 75 years, which is like a really long time. And so, you know, sibling issues or lifespan issues. Siblings who are preschoolers will have some unique concerns. Siblings who are senior citizens will have some unique concerns. And those concerns will evolve and change over the course of the lifespan. Number 3, siblings spend quantity time. What I mean by that is that if we look over the course of the lifespan, it turns out that siblings spend a lot of time together, sometimes longer than parents, as I mentioned. This is especially true early in life when we're young, we're living probably in the same family home as our siblings. We might be going to the same community school. And it's true again later in life. We know this from the research. It's true not only of siblings of people with disabilities, but of all siblings. So over the course of the lifespan, siblings spend a considerable amount of time together. Number 4, siblings spend quality time. And by that, I mean, as Katie knows, I'm a big fan of inclusion. I say this a lot. I love inclusive classrooms. I think, you know, we should have a chance for all of our kids to learn from each other's differences. But no classmate in an inclusive classroom is going to have as great an impact on the social development of a child with a disability than his or her brother or sister, right? There's a lot of important social development and modeling that siblings are involved in with each other. And then finally, siblings are the next generation of caregivers. This is something that certainly we families are recognizing and feeling every single day as parents are aging and in some cases passing away. That primary caregiver may no longer be there or may no longer be available in the same way that they've always been for their now adult child. And what's happening is that adult siblings are much of the time stepping in as caregivers, as support. But, you know, you only need to spend about like 3 minutes in our SibNet Facebook group and read about, you know, a few posts. You will recognize that many siblings feel vastly underprepared to serve this role for a lot of reasons that we'll talk about looking ahead. So all of these reasons, I think, are, you know, pretty valid reasons as to why we should be thinking about brothers and sisters at every turn. And if we really want to be serious about offering family-centered support and family-centered care, we need to remember the family members who will have the longest lasting relationship to the person with the disability, right? And that's their siblings. I'm not going to do a breakout, mostly because the format of the webinar won't let us, and for time, but I want you guys to think about, specifically think about siblings. I mean, when you think about the sibling experience, I want you to think about some unique concerns, so challenges, concerns that you think siblings experience, as well as some unique opportunities, okay? Because one thing that we know from the research is that just like everyone else's life, siblings, the sibling experience is really kind of a mixed bag. It's not all good or all bad. It's kind of all of the above at any given time. So I want you to think about not only the not so good stuff, but the good stuff that you think siblings can experience. And if you can just type into the Q&A, I'm going to look at the Q&A.
We have chat open. Sorry to interrupt. We have chat open.
Oh, we have chat. Okay, that's good. That's a little bit easier to read. Except for I don't see, wait, let me look. Oh, there it is. Okay, I found the chat. Awesome. So if you guys could just type into the chat let's start with concerns. Let's start with concerns. If you can type into the chat some concerns that you think siblings experience. If you are an adult sibling, you're going to be ahead of the game on this one. Think about some unique concerns you think that siblings might experience as a result of having a brother or sister with a disability.
While those are coming in, Emily, there is one question in the chat.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what age parents should try to find support for the siblings.
It's such a great question. So, you know, first of all, sib shops are really kind of designed for school age kids. So when we talk about sib shops, the classic age range is like 8 to 13. And then now we have sib shops that are for teenagers that, you know, people are kind of developing. But that is not to say that younger siblings don't need support. And we are, in fact, in the process right now of developing an app for parents to use with preschool age siblings. So like that 3 to 5 age range, because we know that even young kids observe. There's an expression that I use all the time that children are excellent observers, but not always the best interpreters. You know, children kind of make sense of the world by what they see, but they don't necessarily always put the pieces together correctly because their reasoning is developing, their minds are still developing. But so even young siblings observe the differences that their brothers and sisters with disabilities experience, right? They can observe when someone comes to the house 2 times a week to help their sister roll around on the ball and learn to walk. They observe because this is what kids do, especially young kids. Fairness is everything. Just ask my own 2 children. If I give them each a cookie, you better hope that those cookies are the same size or there's going to be problems. But you know, for kids who, for fairness is such a big deal, they observe the differences, that there's more time and attention going to the sibling with a disability. And so we're really trying to work on creating supports for even younger kids, you know, preschool age kids, so that they can start to understand that, you know, they're special and valuable and loved as well. Okay, so we have develops lots of patience. Yes, that is a plus. Wondering if the familial experience in rural areas are different from urban areas. How can the family engage and work career supports for child sibling? Yeah, in fact, this app, we're aiming specifically towards people who have families who have typically not been as represented in our groups, and that includes rural families. Because, you know, if you have to drive an hour and a half to your nearest sib shop, chances are, you know, you're not going to be making it every month. Yeah, I think that isolation that we're probably going to talk about in just a minute is even more pronounced for families in rural areas. And we can talk more about that. Lots of time from parents. Yes, so the sibling with a disability, the child with a disability gets a lot of time and attention from parents. Siblings can experience burnout and caregiver fatigue for sure. Deal with publicly embarrassing situations. Yes, meltdowns. And, you know, it's really hard. We'll see if somebody thinks of the flip side of this. It's very embarrassing for siblings, especially siblings in that tween and teen age range, when their brothers and sisters, you know, have kind of like socially unexpected behaviors in public. That can be really, really embarrassing. Or even at home, you know, they might hesitate to bring friends home. Siblings may feel it's an automatic acceptance that they will be their sibling's guardian without having an open discussion with their parents about it. So true. And, you know, future concerns is high on the list of the challenges that siblings experience, because we know from our books, from our sib shops, from talking with siblings, we know that even young siblings are thinking about and worrying about the future. You'd be surprised at how young they are when they start thinking about, well, who's going to take care of my brother or sister later in life? What role am I going to play? Is my brother or sister going to live with me? We have siblings in our teen group who are going off to college and who are saying, I need to find a job, a career. I need to study something that's going to lead to a job that's going to enable me to make enough money so that I can support my brother or sister. Right? These are real concerns that they carry around. And so when it comes to future planning, and you know, we'll get to the tips on how to support siblings, encouraging siblings to participate in those conversations about future planning, even at young ages, you know, at every transition point. We take the semi-radical stance of saying, you know, invite the sibling to attend the IEP meeting. Because not only will they have things to add to that conversation because they know their brothers and sisters in ways that are just different from the way parents do, it's really important for them to understand that there are conversations happening about transition and about the future, and that they have a voice in those conversations. So future concerns is a big one. Loss of experiences their peers may have, absolutely. When I talk about isolation, I told you how isolated I felt growing up. I always couple that with the idea of loss, right? Loss of kind of the normal relationship, the normal sibling, right? And I use air quotes because I really don't care for that word, but it really is the way that many siblings view the experiences of their friends who have brothers and sisters who don't have disabilities, right? There's kind of a typical kind of relationship that they don't share. And also experiences, vacations, family trips, outings, simple outings to a restaurant, right? A lot of those things can really depend upon the behavior or mood of the sibling with a disability, or maybe sometimes, the medical needs. Maybe it's just not physically possible to go out to a restaurant as an entire family. So loss of those kinds, excuse me, those kinds of experiences. Siblings also talk about, if they grow up in a 2-parent home, only one parent could ever be at their baseball game or soccer game or whatever, because one parent always had to be home with a brother or sister. Feel less important or loved, right? Because the sibling requires so much more time and attention. And again, sorry, this is seasonal allergies, by the way. I'm fully vaccinated. Again, this is really, really important in terms of remembering that children are excellent observers, but not always the best interpreters, because they see that brother or sister needs more time and attention. And what does that equate to? Well, they must be more important. They must be more loved. Sibling becomes a standard upper and protects the other. Absolutely. And we kind of categorize that as advocacy, right? And that's a really good thing, that siblings learn to become advocates at an early age. But that can also be really tricky for siblings who don't always know what to do in a situation where maybe their brother or sister is being bullied, or maybe they feel torn. Maybe they're in a situation where they don't want to have to go and leave their, leave their friends to go and stand up for their brother or sister because they're having fun at recess with their friends. Feeling ashamed that they don't want to devote their lives to be a caregiver. Absolutely. And thank you for saying that, Denise, because that really is the shame and the guilt. It's impossible to talk about being a sibling without talking about guilt. We're gonna get to this in the next slide. But feeling that burden, that responsibility that you're kind of born into in some cases, right? That you have this kind of lifelong understanding that will eventually be your role. And feeling ashamed or guilty that you don't especially want, you didn't really sign up for that, and you don't especially want to do that. Like, you have other goals and dreams. And so, we talk a lot in our field about self-determination, right? The right for people with disabilities to be front and center at decision-making for their lives that enable them to pursue their goals and dreams. And right on, as it should be. We believe that self-determination is really for everyone, and that includes siblings, right? And we believe that siblings should be able to make decisions for their own lives as well, decisions that enable them to pursue their own goals and dreams. And for many siblings, that's a really, really hard thing to commit to without feeling some sense of guilt that they are abandoning ship, or leaving behind their family of origin and kind of not helping out the way they should be. All right, so I'm going to put these up on the screen. You guys talked, oops, it decided to stop. You guys talked a lot about these unique concerns, and these are just a few. These are just kind of trends, what we know from the research. I want to talk about that first bullet because that didn't come up as much, and that is such an important one. We have our SIB Shop curriculum here, and we devote an entire chapter in this book to the need for information, because it is one of the major ways that the sibling experience parallels the parent experience, in that brothers and sisters really need information about the disability. Because when you think about it, where do parents get information from? If you all could talk, you'd be yelling now. If I could hear you, if your mics if you were able to unmute, you would be saying doctors, clinicians, psychologists, teachers, right? Social workers, all of you, from all of you, we have access as parents to information from experts and from professionals. But if siblings are lucky, siblings don't always have access to us and to those people, to those professionals. If siblings are lucky, they receive that information from parents. And all too often that does not happen for the best, most loving reasons, right? Many parents want to protect their typically developing children. They don't want to burden them. They don't want to confuse them. And so they don't share information about the disability. And it's like the elephant in the room growing up, right? That there aren't open conversations about it. And that can be really, really challenging. And I always invite parents to think about the fact that, again, there's not just one person in this family experiencing the disability. Everyone is experiencing it. And by not talking about it, it can create a lot of challenges that don't necessarily need to be there. We talked about that need for information. Connected to that is the next one, over identification. So sometimes siblings feel like, well, am I going to have the same thing that my brother or sister has? The isolation we talked about, just like parents of kids with disabilities who feel like, oh gosh, you have this diagnosis and suddenly you're the only person in the world, who is experiencing something like this. Very, very true of siblings as well. Some of you talked about the increased caregiving and responsibility. Many siblings really do pitch in to help take care of their brothers and sisters, even from a young age. And then the resentment, right? The resentment that can come when family life really seems to revolve around one person and one person only, and that's the person with a disability. So, daily routines, again, ability to go out and do things, time, attention, expectations, and consequences, right? When those aren't equal for kids, that can create a big problem, right? When the child with a disability is overindulged or allowed to kind of get away with things that their typically developing siblings don't, there aren't the same consequences, that can create a lot of resentment. Embarrassment, you guys talked about. Guilt. Yes, we cannot talk about siblings without talking about guilt. And guilt too, survivor's guilt, right? Like why my sibling? Why not me? Guilt over, typically surpassing typical milestones, right? So if you're 16 and you're so excited to drive, but you have an older sister who loves cars, but because of her intellectual disability will never be able to drive one, that might put a little damper on your excitement. Pressure to achieve. This is such an important one, especially for you, all you folks who are going to go out there and work with young siblings or work with siblings, period, because many siblings feel the pressure to be the good kid, the perfect kid, to not add any burdens to their parents' lives because they perceive that their parents have enough on their plate with their brother or sister, right? And so many siblings say they grow up feeling that they could never mess up, that they had to be perfect. And really one of the most valuable lessons we can teach our young sibs is that not only is it okay to mess up, it's expected because we're all human, last time I checked, right? But we also learn and grow from making mistakes. And that's really, really so important to model when you're working with young kids. And then, of course, we talked about future concerns and that even some of our youngest siblings are already worried about the future and what that's going to look like and what their responsibilities are going to be. This can carry over into dating and relationships, right? When you're at that point in your life where you feel like you're ready to find your life partner, well, it's hard enough finding a life partner who's going to put up with your quirks, much less your quirks. And by the way, you're a package deal with your sibling with a disability. And if we start a life together, chances are that life is going to at some point include taking care of my brother or sister. Future concerns also about having children who might, have the same disability as the sibling. So all of these are really, really, really important to be mindful of when you think about how you can best support siblings. I want to flip the switch. Some of you did put some nice opportunities there, the patience and a few other things. So I'm going to ask you again to jump into the chat and tell us some good things you think can happen as a result of having a sibling with a disability. Learn that public opinion is not necessarily that important. It's okay to be different and march to your own beat. Yes, absolutely. Siblings are, kind of natural born. I always say natural born social workers. Social work 101 is like, you have to meet people where they're at. Well, siblings kind of do this naturally. There's a lot of space for difference with siblings because, diversity training for siblings it happens 365 days a year before breakfast. Siblings know what it's like to grow up with and love someone who's different. Acceptance of others, absolutely. And empathy, perspective. Yes, a lot of times that's also because, unfortunately, siblings have seen what happens when other people aren't quite so accepting of their brothers and sisters, right? And they don't tolerate that. Empathy, perspective, yes. Bringing awareness to the siblings of the disability, and it gives them empathy and compassion, absolutely. The advocacy that we talked about earlier, and vocation, those of us who are siblings who wind up in these helping professions, you know what I'm talking about. And the research definitely backs that up. Many siblings find themselves in helping fields. I'm going to put these on the screen now, and we can talk a little bit more. So tolerance, we talked about. Advocacy, we are natural born advocates. Insight, right? Because some people consider insight wisdom, right? And understanding of the human condition and all of the different facets that entails. Maturity, right? As a result, sometimes of having that extra responsibility growing up. Humor, many of us, I think, who have family members with disabilities would agree that we have a, unique, if not slightly twisted sense of humor, because we learn that we have to kind of laugh at the absurd times, and there certainly are enough absurd times in our lives, and our families. It's that sink or swim, laugh or cry kind of thing. Vocation, we talked about. Pride, tremendous pride in the accomplishments of their brothers and sisters. Well, we had a teen in our SIB teen group the other day say, she posted, she said, "Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so excited. I can't wait to tell you this. Like, I know I can't tell my friends because they will not get it, but I'm so proud of my brother because he's 13 and he just learned how to tie his shoes. And I cannot believe he got it. I'm so proud of him." Inspiration, right? By the determination and grit modeled by their brothers and sisters. Appreciation for their families, for their own health, right? I think most of us kind of take our health for granted, but if you have a sibling who's had like 5 surgeries by the time they're 7 years old, you might have a different perspective on health and appreciating it. I mentioned appreciation for families. I think sometimes parents worry what their kiddos are going to say at SIB shops, right? Like when they drop them off at the SIB shop door or leave them on the screen, it's like, what are they going to say about us? I think a lot of parents would be so pleasantly surprised to recognize how much these kiddos understand and appreciate all of their efforts to kind of hold it all together, right? To keep the family together, to keep the planet turning every day, right? Really, really appreciate that. And then last but not least, loyalty to their brothers and sisters, to their families, to their friends. Siblings tend to choose their friends and people they let into their lives carefully and nurture those relationships mightily. And that is really connected to loyalty and appreciation. All right, so to close things out, I can't believe the time is going by so quickly. I want to give you some simple strategies to support siblings, and then hopefully we'll have a few minutes for more Q&A. So I'll go through these kind of quickly. You guys have my slide handout, so you have this. The first one is to provide siblings with age-appropriate information. Remember what I said, that parents have access to professionals and all kinds of information about the disabilities that their children have. Siblings rely upon parents. And so if you are a parent or if you're a professional who's working with siblings, please be mindful that, that little brother or sister could really, really benefit from having direct access to information. So maybe that looks like on your website, you have a kid-friendly section on your website to explain to kids what it is you do and what disabilities you support. Maybe it's saving 10 minutes at your next session to talk to the brother or sister of your client, and to ask the parent, hey, I know that so-and-so has a younger sister who's 8, right? Does she have any questions? Do you think it would benefit her to maybe talk to me for 10 minutes and just be able to talk about like what's happening with her brother's treatment plan or what we do here every week, or the more you can make yourselves available to have those conversations with siblings, to answer their questions, the better it's going to be, because siblings really do, they just absorb the information like sponges. Number 2, provide siblings with opportunities to meet other siblings. Obviously, sib shops we love for this reason. This is a great opportunity for kids to meet each other, but it doesn't have to be sib shops. Maybe you guys have a buddy walk, or a annual holiday party, or a family picnic or something that you bring together families. It's probably all virtual now, but when you do have these occasions, think about ways that you can carve out time for siblings to get together and to spend some time together. For parents, maybe you're planning a play date for the kid with a disability. Why not see if the siblings want to meet each other as well? Encourage good communication with typically developing children. We talk a lot about active listening in sib shops and in supporting siblings in general. And what that really means in a nutshell, I don't think I gave this resource to you, but I can type it into the chat. This is a great crash course in active listening, how to talk so kids will listen, and listen so kids will talk. It's a super easy read, lots of pictures. What it comes down to, I'll summarize the entire book for you so you don't have to read it if you don't know. You should still read it. Don't take my word for it. But the idea behind active listening is something that I will just say this in a nutshell. If you remember nothing I say today about siblings, just remember this one thing, right? And it's related to active listening. Siblings want to be heard and validated, right? If we are present when we're hearing and listening to siblings, if we're acknowledging what they say, if we're validating what they say, that I can't tell you what a long way that goes. That means the world to siblings. So when we talk about good communication, we want you to hear and validate these young siblings. Encourage parents to set aside special time with siblings. None of us has enough time in the day, of course. And the good news with siblings, again, is that a little goes a long way. For me, growing up, as Katie knows, she's heard the story, it was 15 minutes in the car on a Friday night with my mom picking up dinner, and 15 minutes on the ride home. And during that 30 minutes, it was my favorite 30 minutes of every week. We could talk about everything or nothing, or just listen to the radio, but it was my time with my mom. Can't tell you how many other stories I've heard of siblings who say, yep, when we take my brother to therapy, we sit in the car, we listen to a podcast, or we talk about school, or we just do whatever. It's my time with my parents. Maybe it's 20 minutes after the sibling with the disability is put to bed, that the typically developing sibling can just have with their parents, right? So a little goes a long way, small, consistent gestures. Number 5, learn more about life as a sibling. If you go to our website, which I think is on my last slide, you can find out all about so many books. You can read about what life is like as a sibling. In a little bit, we're going to do an adult sibling panel, which I think is the most powerful way for you to learn about life as a sibling, to hear directly from the experts who are adult siblings reflecting back upon their experiences. There's so many great movies and documentaries now about siblings. You have a lot of information at your fingertips. Number 6, encourage parents to reassure their children by making future plans. And again, this starts young, right? At every transition point. Make sure that siblings know that there are conversations happening, and make sure that they have an opportunity to be part of those conversations, right? So that if the sibling comes to you and says, Mom, Dad, when I grow up, I want Peter to live with me, and I'm going to take care of him. It's going to be great, right? We want parents to be empowered to say, you know what, Emily, if that's what you want later on in life, and if that's what Peter wants later on in life, we will support that. But if that's not what you want, and if that's not what Peter wants, you need to know that there are other options, right? And we might not know exactly what all of them are right now, but we're going to talk about them and explore them together as a family. And then last but not least, remember that the single strongest factor affecting a sibling's interpretation of a disability is the parent's interpretation of a disability. This is so important, right? This is all about family culture. And so if parents feel that this disability is like the biggest tragedy to befall our family, chances are siblings are going to probably feel a similar way. However, if parents say, you know what, this wasn't exactly what we had planned, but we're gonna approach it with as much grace and humor as possible, we have every reason to expect that at the end of the day, siblings will follow suit. Might not have some bumps in the road, especially maybe around adolescence, but at the end of the day, the siblings are really going to follow in the footsteps of parents in terms of the attitude and approach. I want to leave you guys with this quote. This was a quote that was in our SibNet group, as adult sister from New York. And I like to leave you with this thought because it really speaks to the power of connection and enabling siblings to connect with each other. And she wrote in our group, "What I really want to write is a note of gratitude. For the first time in my life, I have found this home. It is one I have needed for a very long time. I'm no closer to fixing my brother or taking away my parents' grief. And I am still really scared about the future and sad about how the world treats my brother. But I kind of feel like we are this group of quiet warriors, separated by so much distance, but somehow together, holding each other up, pushing each other forward. Thank you all." And with that, I want to thank you all for taking the time to be here today and to learn more about siblings and the Sibling Support Project.